Shalom, family. Shalom, shalom. First and foremost, we're going to give all praises, honor, and glory to the Most High God, Yahweh, by hamashiach, Yahawashi. That's all praises, every last praise to the Most High God, Yahweh, in the name of His only Son, who the world calls Jesus Christ, Yahawashi. All right, this is your brother Ash recalled with the fire of God. I just wanted to take some time out early this morning to destroy some false doctrine. I was watching a video of the knockoff We Won't Smoke, Return to the Smoke Room with Vocab Malone, the snake, the great serpent. He's basically doing Q&A. And another cold cracker comes on the show and asks him about Isaiah 14. We're going to get into that real quick. Vocab Malone basically butchers and abuses the text of Isaiah, the 14th chapter, namely dealing with the captivity that the other nations are going to have to go into. So without further ado, we just going to jump into it. I'm not going to do not too much yapping. So let's see what he's talking about.
Oh.
Okay, thank you. That was a thoughtful spot. One final question, if I may. It's about the Isaiah 14, 1 and 2, and also because there's obviously a lot of Hebrew Israelites, particularly like Hebrew Israelites, they like to focus on the.
He says the Hebrew Israelites, and particularly the black Hebrew Israelites, like there's a difference in doctrine when it comes to the slavery of the heathen. We know we got a few Conalites out there that might feel like the heathen are going to be best friends with us in the kingdom. So this is for them too. We're going to teach you how to rightly divide the word of the Most High God. What this snake is going to do is he's going to try to teach the audience how to slither out of prophecy. What we're going to show you is that there's no way for these snakes to slither.
Rod of iron and.
Because, if I was a heathen, if I found out I was a heathen, I'd be scared too, right? But scared doesn't get you out of what the Most High God has in store, period. It don't matter if you're on the Israelite side. It don't matter if you're on the heathen side. There was no way for us to slither out of Deuteronomy, the 28th chapter, and all the curses therein, and there's no way for these heathen to slither out of a damn thing.
This idea of an ethnic hierarchy, I was kind of curious on how do you interpret those verses, because some will look at Isaiah 14.
Ethnic hierarchy, we're going to touch on that real quick too. Ethnic hierarchy just means that there's stratification. It means there's a top, there's a bottom, and depending on what your ethnicity is, you may fit the demographic of the top or you may fit the demographic of the bottom. As simple as that. And it just so happens there will be social stratification. There will be a ethnic hierarchy in the kingdom of heaven. It's the rulership of who the world calls Jesus Christ, Yahawashi, and the Israelites under him. And the heathen will be subject to us and the laws and statutes and commandments of the Most High God.
In 1 and 2 and say that's simply talking about Babylon at that time. And they'll kind of close the book on that. And yet the Black Hebrew Israelites will say this is a perpetual thing, talking about Babylon being America today. And so I was kind of curious how you stood on that and how you see that as, because a lot of people have different opinions on this, on the kingdom of God. Like, there's Israel, they're the Gentiles, and will they be, they'll be fellow heirs, kind of working together. And then you have these other people who rejected the Messiah, and they may be in a subjugated state as some type of servant. And then other people, reject that idea altogether. So I was just kind of curious on how you stood and how you interpret Scripture on that. Obviously, this is a controversial topic, but I am just genuinely curious on your thoughts on it.
Right. A few things about it. I don't think that the King James Version serves.
This guy, man. And what you're going to find out is the translation makes no difference, especially when you go into the scriptures that Vocab Malone's about to pull, like the snake that he is. But you're going to see.
Well here. I don't think it's as explicit as it could be. I think it's a little ambiguous. But, ultimately, you look at the Hebrew, and I think it bears out a better relation to the way most modern translations translate it, which I think there's some differences that I think help the reader understand what's going on. So here I am in the ESV, and it says Isaiah 14:1, for the Lord, that's Yahweh, will have compassion on Jacob and will again choose Israel and will set them apart in their own land And sojourners will join them and will attach themselves to the house of Jacob. And the peoples will take them and bring them to their place, and the house of Israel will possess them in the lands.
So, man, first of all, let's go to the ESV and we'll go ahead and we'll do a side by side. We'll go into the ESV and we'll go into the King James version. I'm gonna put a KJV up right here, and then we're gonna go into the Hebrew with it as well. And then I'm gonna go into the ESV on my phone, so y'all won't be able to see that, unfortunately. Shalakia on that. Hold on, let me get it real quick. So we got Isaiah 14 in the ESV, and we got it in the KJV. So it says, "For the Lord," I'm reading the ESV first. It says, "For the Lord will have compassion on Jacob and will again choose Israel and will set them in their own land. And sojourners will join them and will attach themselves unto Jacob." The KJV says, "For Yahweh will have mercy on Jacob and will yet choose Israel and set them in their own land. And the strangers shall be joined with them, and they shall cleave to the house of Jacob." Now, this is the problem. It doesn't matter really when you get into it, when you read the context of what this scripture is saying. It doesn't really matter what they're calling these people, a heathen stranger, right? A heathen stranger or a heathen sojourner. They can be treated, and they will be treated the way that we are interpreting the scripture in its proper form, which is that these kingdoms is going to go into these kingdoms, these nations are going to go into slavery under the Israelites. Every nation that has oppressed us will be oppressed, as the scripture suggests. So this prophet has to be lying in order for that to not come to pass, no matter how the ESV wants to word it. So if it's sojourners in the land, then them sojourners is going to go into captivity. But let's just find out if that's what the scripture is saying, right? He's going to try to make it seem like there's a way to wiggle out of it. I'll let y'all hear what that sounds like. But, first and foremost, we just got to address these points. So, period, point blank, the Most High is going to choose Israel. He's going to set us in our own land, and strangers will be present, right? Or you can call them sojourners if you want to, right? The emotion, the connotation that you may, the vibration that you may get off of either word use has no dictation over what the scripture is actually saying. You'll see. So it says they're going to cleave to the house of Israel. The part that he's going to go to next is verse 2. "And the people shall take them." Let me make sure he gets a chance to finish his interpretation. So hold with me. I don't do this very often.
In the Lord's land as male and female slaves.
Okay, so here we go. Verse 2, "And the people shall take them and bring them to their place." Let's see. So we're going to take them, right? We are going to get them. We're going to lay hold of them. We are going to seize them. We're going to receive them, acquire them, buy them, bring them, snatch them, marry them, take a wife, right? These are all the applications for the Hebrew wordage, right? That he's saying we got to go into the Hebrew to get an understanding of what's being said. This word implies the snatching, the getting, and the acquiring of. You can imply that there is going to be Israelites taking a dominant stance and removing people from where they're at and putting them in their place. Again, as long as you read according to the context. So all we got to do is continue. "Take them and bring them to their place. And the house of Israel," where he's getting to next, "shall possess them in the land of the Lord for servants and handmaids." The land of the Lord, that's Israel, right? What's this word possess mean? Since he's talking about going into the Hebrew, the word nakal, inherit, the way that you inherit slaves, right? The type of slaves that you can only take of the heathen people. If we go into the book of Leviticus, right? Occupy, bequeath, distribute. Let me see. Let's go to the Brown driver's bridge, right? To get as a possession, acquire, inherit, possess, taking possession, inherit, to have or get as a possession, property, right? Possess them in the land of the Lord for servants and handmaids. and they shall take them captives. Now, this takes a little confusion away. This, this takes a little confusion away. And unfortunately, even though vocab is going to the ESV, which I'm about to read, it says the same thing. Take them captives, whose captives they were. I'm going to read the ESV version real quick, starting at verse 2, Isaiah 14. The prophets will take them and bring them to their place. So like the people will take them and bring them to their place, and the house of Israel will possess them in the Lord's land as male and female slaves. Male and female slaves. They will take them captive, those who were their captors, and rule over those who oppress them. That's all we've been saying. That's all we've been saying is that the blacks, Hispanics, and Native Americans have been captive to people, and the Israelites that are scattered to the four corners. And those same people, we're going to have them as captives, because the Most High God is going to do a role reversal, except this is going to be permanent. Israel's going to be a kingdom that reigns forever. Hamashiach Yahawashi is going to reign forever. Right? So this is something that there's no way around, and I don't understand why vocab tries to dance around the subject matter like this. I really think it's because, I'm not going to say I know it's because he's not as astute in the scriptures as he thinks he is. He might have good arguments for the subject matter that he wants to argue, but these scriptures were given to us, right? You go to Zechariah, the 8th chapter, in the last verse, and it tells you that these nations is going to be taking hold of the skirt of us, the Jews, to learn the law, statutes, and commandments in the Most High, to get closer to the Most High God, Yahweh. So, let's continue. Let's see what other weak-ass argument he's going to come up with, and we'll myth bust that as well.
They will take captive those who were their captors and rule over those who oppress them. So a few things about that. One is that in general, the Bible has a notion of sort of what we might call things getting set right. And a lot of times that involves sort of things getting turned opposite of what they are in this world, right? And so you have the oppressors right here, and then you have his people, and you have that being flipped. And now the oppressors are here and his people are here. And really, it's just what God does. He sets things aright. And so I think that's important to understand. That's a general thing, is that God will.
And this is correct. The Most High God sets things right. Well, let's hear what his interpretation of right is.
Things in right and order, ultimately in the end, right? But his kingdom, in the meantime, God's people are supposed to look like that. They're supposed to represent that as well. So,
see, and this is a point that he made for what? Right. This is called, this is a straw man argument. When an Israelite presents this argumentation, it is obvious that we are supposed to represent the kingdom of the Most High God in order to get the kingdom of the Most High God. Right. So the reason that he's saying this is because they like to act like we talk bad. We're not nice to them, so we must not be of the Most High God. So you got to learn to ignore things like that, and you got to hear the points that are scriptural, so that you can attack their biblical integrity. And if you can attack the structure of their argument, right, then you can destroy it that way. You don't want to get tit for tat with little corny comments like that, because all it's going to do is misdirect you from the point. The point he's trying to make is that God sets things aright, and because he can't find a way around that, he has to throw that out there. But let's look at an example of what it looks like when the Most High God makes things right. First and foremost, from the beginning, the Most High done told us that he's about making things right. So let's go to the book of Deuteronomy. Right, we talk about curses. We talk about going into captivity. We talk about role reversals after the captivity. We were told how he was going to go into captivity and how he was going to get out. Deuteronomy, the 30th chapter. And it shall come to pass, when all these things are come upon thee, the blessing and the curse which I have set before thee, and thou shalt call them to mind among all the nations whither the Lord thy God hath driven thee, and shall return unto the Lord thy God, and shall obey his voice according to all that I command thee this day, that thou and thy children with all thy heart and with all thy soul, that then Yahweh thy God will turn thy captivity and have compassion on thee, and will return and gather thee from all the nations whither the Most High God have scattered thee. Right? The same way we're talking about being returned to our own land in Isaiah, the 14th chapter. But let's skip down, right? We're going to skip down to verse 7. So upon us being returned to our own land, it's also written right in the very covenant that we're discussing. That verse 7, and the Lord thy God will put all these curses upon thine enemies. Isn't slavery a part of those curses? You shall serve your enemies in hunger and in thirst and in nakedness and want of all things. We're going to be impoverished in them the same way because God is a God of justice. He makes things right. Right? Justice sets things right. So it's about the recompense that's going to come to these nations for touching the apple of the Most High God's eye, right? And if a Christian thinks he's going to get around this by saying, oh, that's in the Old Testament, well, he got another thing coming and we're going to go to it, right? But let's just finish it out. I will put all these curses upon thine enemies and on them that hate thee, which persecuted thee. Let's just see if the text of Isaiah the 14th chapter reflects this. Isaiah 14:2 again, and the people shall take them and bring them to their place, and the house of Israel, and mind you, it says the whole house of Israel. This is important to keep in mind for the latter part of his argumentation. The house of Israel shall possess them in the land of the Lord for servants and handmaids, and they shall take them captives, whose captives they were, and they shall rule over their oppressors. Right? Oh, but that's the Old Testament. It's not that easy. It's not that easy, family. Let's get Revelation. I'm sure y'all know where I'm going. Those of you that are studied and well adapted to this truth. Revelations 13:9. If any man have an ear, let him hear. He that leadeth into captivity shall go into captivity. He that killeth with the sword must be killed with the sword. Here's the patience in the faith of the saints. Now, this snake vocab alone, he'll go to a translation that says, he that is to go into captivity shall go into captivity, right? He that is to be killed will be killed. Well, it's prophesied from the beginning that these other nations is going to go into captivity, especially Edom, who we in captivity, the bulk of our captivity to right now. You can go to the book of Numbers 24. And this is important because this is a prophecy about the coming of the hamashiach Yahawashi in the latter days. Numbers 24:17, I shall see him, but not now. I shall behold him, but not nigh. There shall come a star out of Jacob, and a scepter shall rise out of Israel, rulership, right? And shall smite the corners of Moab and destroy all the children of Seth. This is just another transliteration for the word Seth, right? The child of Adam that replaced Abel. And Edom shall be a possession, and Seir also shall be a possession for his enemies, and Israel shall do valiantly. Just talking about warfare. We're going to get one more just to solidify this argumentation, right? Amos. We're going to go to get the book of Amos. We're going to go get the chapter 9. And we're going to go to the 9th verse. For lo, I will command and I will sift the house of Israel among all nations. Now, this is the argumentation that we're putting, is that when it talks about Babylon in terms of Isaiah the 14th, it's talking about Babylon in the latter days, right? It's talking about Babylon in the latter days. And you'll see why it's not talking about the Babylonian exodus of old. Right. For lo, I will command and I will sift the house of Israel among all nations like as corn is sifted in the sea, yet shall not the least grain fall upon the earth. All the sinners of my people shall die by the sword, which say the evil shall not overtake nor prevent us. In that day I will raise up the tabernacle of David that is fallen, and close up the breaches thereof, and I will raise up his ruins, and I will build it as in the days of old, that they may possess the remnant of Edom, and of all the heathen which are called by my name, saith Yahweh. It says all the heathen, and lo and behold, if you go into the Hebrew, the word my, when it says my name, the word my is not there. So it literally says all the heathen that are called by name. If you go to Psalms, the 83rd chapter, it tells you all the enemies of the Most High God. And it's important to understand that all the enemies of the Most High God are going into captivity. It's very simple, very plain, right? So let's go back to this idiot's argumentation now that we've already put a dagger in that ideology, that portion of his ideology, and let's just follow along.
So I think it's important to see God reversing the role there of that. But it doesn't have anything to do, of course, to people listening about an ethnic thing. It has to do with sort of a moral thing, meaning these are people who have oppressed.
Otherwise, if it's not about an ethnic thing, because you got to understand, a part of the criteria is being an Israelite. This is with regard to covenant, right? And the covenantal aspect of this is that God will put you into captivity to these other nations if you break the commandments, and He'll protect you from the other nations if you do keep the commandments, right? If you breach the contract, though, the same way your cell phone company says, look, if you break this contract and you don't pay your bill, your service is going to get connected. There's also a way to reinstate your service, right? No collections, no nothing. You simply pay your bill, you pay your debt, and once you do that, your services are reinstated in full, right? And the Most High God is the same way. So to say it's not an ethnic thing, I mean, it's really retarded. Because what he's saying, when he's saying that, because he can't negate the fact that this is talking about what the Most High God is going to do with the Israelites, he's basically saying that outside of the Israelites, what happens to them, it doesn't matter who is what ethnicity. And we know that's not true because we just read direct prophecies about Edom. We'll read prophecies about how Edom's going to be exterminated in the last days, period, point blank. So to say it's not about ethnicity, I mean, it's a reach for one, and it's really just it's an assertion. It's like, what's the point of making it? What's the point of making such an assertion? Especially if you don't believe that the Edomites is around anymore and all of these things, but they are trying to hide from the truth. Why? Because they know deep down in their souls that, once we get this thing back, it's over for them. They know that once the Most High God sends His Son back, it's going to be over for them. So it is imperative for them to keep as many as our people sucking on the cracker's breast milk, and that is Christianity. Little stupid doctrines like these. As long as they could keep us doing that, then, chances are they'll be able to hold on to their rulership a little bit longer. That's all it is. Why you think he's dealing with the NFL, trying to keep NFL players from learning the truth? He's been given this assignment for a reason. It's because their kingdom's coming to a downfall, right? So to say it's not about ethnicity, I mean, that's retarded. And I will say this for the sake of argumentation and for the sake of brothers and sisters learning exactly what is required of us. It's not all about being an Israelite. It's about being an Israelite and coming back to these laws, statutes, and commandments in faith of the Most High God and His Son, Yahawashi, right?
And now you can see, well, that's going to change. So that's one thing to see. And I think we saw that all the way in Revelation. You see His people being oppressed, right? But that's only going to be for a time or a season. That's only as the Lord allows. Now, in the immediate context, it's interesting what's going on in Isaiah 14.
This means he's about to, I got a sergeant, right? I got a powerful sergeant by the name of Sergeant Yatab Daraj of the Sakari, Seattle. And he calls what he's about to do. He calls what this cracker's about to do chicken wing. He's about to chicken wing this whole shit.
Who is being addressed here? Well, the previous chapter, of course, as you mentioned, the judgment of Babylon. 13:1, the oracle concerning Babylon, which Isaiah the son of Amos saw. And then it goes on, king of Babylon, Babylon, Babylon.
Hey, look at the other dude's eyes. Look at the other dude's eyes. He's hoping and he is dreading. He's dreading the moment Vocabs says something that don't make sense, that he can't go back and argue. He's hoping. He's got his fingers crossed. He's praying to white Jesus. He's about sweating. His armpits got the sweat stains underneath right now. Just listening to this, because he probably just got off of one of Deacon's lives getting cut, and now he's running the Vocab alone thinking this devil's going to save him, and he's not. Look at his eyes, though.
Babylon, Babylon, and it talks about in Babylon, verse 19, the glory of kingdoms and the splendor and pomp of the Chaldeans will be like Sodom and Gomorrah when God overthrew them. Well, that happened in real history, right? Verse 17, behold, I am stirring up the Medes against them who have no regard for civil and do not delight in gold. So it's even telling you who's going to conquer Babylon, right? The Medo-Persian Empire, which is exactly what happened to the Babylonians. And then comes the section about the restoration of Jacob. So it does seem clear the immediate context of Babylon, because it's not only before verses 1 and 2, it's after verses 1 and 2. Right after that, you have Israel's remnant who begins taunting Babylon.
Now, mind you, he's starting at the aforementioned scriptures, and he's saying that because this is talking about ancient Babylon in the previous verse, it must be talking about ancient Babylon and the next verses, the verses that we were talking about to begin with, right? This is what he's saying, and it's important to understand how retarded this argumentation is, and we're going to get into why.
Verse 4, you will take up this taunt against the king of Babylon. How the oppressor has ceased, the insolent fury ceased. So
now he thinks he's hit it on the head. He's like, think about it. He's trying to intellectualize this. He's trying to rationalize why his argument works, and his whole logic is that this is talking about Babylon. But what we're about to get into is the logic of the Israelites. Their point of view from that time frame, right? Why would they be making those proverbs against the king of Babylon in such a celebratory manner if all that happened when the Babylonians' rulership was messed up by the Persians and Medes? All that happened was a change of hands of property, pretty much. You deal with Daniel, for example. Who threw him in the lion's den? The people that threw Daniel in the lion's den was the Persians. Going to show you that the Babylonian captivity wasn't when the Israelites were free, right? It just wasn't. They wasn't going to go into captivity to somebody else altogether and celebrate the fall of Babylon like all their troubles were over. No. But we're going to further examine it because I don't want to make any assertions. But it's going to be all the more clear when we go into the scriptures that we're about to go into to show just how stupid this dude's argument is.
Hebrew Israelites will take this and basically turn it all into something else. They'll make it ethnic, they'll make it America, all kinds of other wacky stuff. But this is to Babylon about
wacky. First of all, he says wacky, so you shouldn't listen to this dude.
Babylon. Now, you could, I think, say rightfully there's a general picture of oppressors who are sinfully oppressing people. It's not just certain ethnicity. It's not just about who has money, but sinfully oppressing people that God's not going to allow that to withstand long term. I think that's a general rule that's true, period, all the time. That's period. That's true, right? But it's clear in the immediate context by the verses.
That's not true. The Most High God will let the heathen go into slavery and stay in slavery until their generation dies out. That's period, point blank. You know what I'm saying? But that's not what this is about. This is about Isaiah 14. I don't want to be too distracting. But, if you guys want, we could go into that in another video. Leave it in the comments.
All before it, and the verses all after it, it's talking about Babylon. And where some people make the mistake is they essentially try to make Babylon America. But that's not what it's talking about. It's talking about Babylon. And then it goes on after that. If you look at the end of the chapter of 14, it talks about Assyria, and then it talks about Philistia. And then it talks about Moab. So these are real nations that are really having oracles against.
This guy's acting like the nations disappear all of a sudden just because they're not called by these names anymore. This is problematic. It's entirely problematic. You know what I'm saying? Otherwise, in terms of any prophecy that's pertaining to the last days, where do you see America, the most prominent nation in all the world? Where do you see that? You know what? Never mind. I'm not going to go into a tangent.
Go all the way to verse 17, an oracle concerning Damascus. Keep on going, verse 8, chapter 18, rather. An oracle concerning Cush. Isaiah is prophesying, and that means
Cush. I mean, look, the Ethiopians, you know what I'm saying, especially dealing with the Habashite people, they still identify themselves as Cushites. It's no question. they still will identify themselves as the ancient Babylonians. I had the privilege of talking to a Cushite dude, you know, and he knew his heritage went back to Babylon, back to Nimrod and them. You know what I'm saying? He knew it, and his people know it. So the argument that this idiot is making is terrible. You know what I'm saying? You deal with the what you call them, the Iranians. They still identify as ancient Persia. So let's stop playing these games.
Way of saying things against the other nations. Isaiah 19, an oracle concerning Egypt. And then at the end of that 19, you have a strange situation where Egypt and Syria are together blessed with Israel. So with all of that, I do see it as ultimately there's biblical principles that are permanent there, which is the oppressor relationship is changed. God doesn't allow that to stand, right? The wicked oppression. But at the same time, you have who is it really about? It's about Babylon. And here's what's interesting. Most Hebrew Israelites haven't considered this, but I think they should consider it. And it's about, was this fulfilled in the pages of the Bible itself, in the book of Ezra? And I think you can make a...
And you know what? Let me tell you, we have considered, my teachers have considered, plenty of brothers across this wicked-ass kingdom have considered it. And we're going to show you through the spirit of power, Yahawashi and Yahawashi, just how we've not only considered, but we've explored the possibility and we've eliminated it.
strong case that that is the case. And here's what I mean. When you go to Ezra chapter 2, it talks about the exiles who are coming back from the land. Now, these are the people of the province who came up from the captivity of the exiles whom Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon. So I don't think it's any accident that Ezra 2 mentions specifically Babylon and the king of Babylon, the same exact entities mentioned in Isaiah and the surrounding chapters of 14. Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, had taken captive to Babylon. They returned to Jerusalem and Judah, each of their own, in company with, and it names a bunch of people. It lists a bunch of names of men. It names a bunch of men where they go, priests, Levites.
Now, you can play the game and just say, oh, it lists a bunch of men, and it's important to focus in on those men. One of those men being the prophet Nehemiah, along with Zerubbabel and Mordecai themselves. But what we're going to do is look at Nehemiah the prophet, and we're going to just see what his testimony is about his experience after leaving Babylon, or after leaving the Persians and Medes, I should say. Right? This is where it gets sticky for his argument, right? Because he's implying that, oh, because it says Babylon here, it must be talking about Isaiah the 14th chapter, but they're not being set free from Babylon just because they're a part of those that have left the captivity from Babylon. No, they're being, they were transferred into the custody of a whole other nation, the Persians and Medes, who took the Babylonians down. So this is where his argument starts to really crumble. We don't have to assert much. All we got to do is go to the witnesses on the scenes and their contemporary, right?
Musicians, temple servants, descendants of the servants of Solomon. And here's what's so fascinating. When you get to the end, it mentions verse 64. The whole company numbered 42,360, besides their 7,337 male and female slaves. They also had 200 male and female singers. So it's like Israel was returning from captivity. So they were in captivity. They're returning with servants.
And then bingo, you got it. I guess you broke it down. Maybe he might be a Levite, right? Hell no. And this guy is crazy. He's out of his damn mind. He sees the word slaves there, and then prophecy is fulfilled. But let's go into it, right? So the names he didn't read. Let's go to verse 2 of Ezra 2. Which came with Zerubbabel, Jeshua, Nehemiah, Sariah, Reliah, Mordecai, Bilshan, Mispar, Bigvi, Raham, Banah. Now, I would suggest that brothers and sisters read up about these names and see where they correlate to this narrative. This is very important because he skipped over a bunch of backstory by skipping over the names and not delving into what these individuals had to say. It was very, very convenient, right? Let me go to the Bible real quick. To the Bible, as they say. So we're going to go to Nehemiah 1, right? Nehemiah 1 is going to start us off with the perspective that we're looking for. And we're just going to start at verse 1. Hold on real quick, Salakia. So let's pay close attention. Nehemiah 1 and 1. The words of Nehemiah, the son of Hekeliah. And it came to pass in the month Chislu, in the 20th year, as I was in Shushan, the palace. Where's Shushan, the palace at? Let's just look at it. I don't have to tell you. We can look it up. Shushan. Let's go to the Strongs on that. Shushan, a palace in Persia. Right? So he's in Persia. He's not back in the land of Israel, but he's not in the custody of the Babylonians either. Right? Nor is Zerubbabel, nor is Mordecai. So, maybe what we need to do is revisit Isaiah the 14th chapter, right? Maybe we need to revisit Isaiah the 14th chapter. Let's go to the blue letter. I gotta get all my books open. Let's go back to Isaiah the 14th chapter. For the Lord will have mercy on Jacob and will yet choose Israel and set them in their own land, right? And the stranger shall be joined with them, and they shall cleave to the house of Jacob. Man, I mean, if you read into it, not only does it look like it's talking about the Judites, right, but it's talking about the northern kingdom also, the house of Jacob. The house of Jacob isn't just the Jews. Israel isn't a name for Judah. So it's either talking about the northern kingdom or it's talking about Israel as a whole. Why is it that we got some of the foremost prophets still in captivity during the time that this salvation took place that this idiot is talking about? This so-called salvation. Let's read a little bit further. So we see that the prophet Nehemiah, he's in captivity somewhere in Persia. Right? Let's read further and see if we're mistaken it. Maybe he's in Persia and he's just kicking it because that's how it goes, because we should join hand in hand with the heathen. And God designed it like that from the beginning, right? So we got Nehemiah still in custody. Let's go down to, let's go to verse 11, I think. Okay. Nehemiah 1 and 11. O Lord, I beseech thee, let now thine ear be attentive to the prayer of thy servant and to the prayer of thy servants, who desire to fear thy name and prosper, I pray thee, thy servant this day, and grant him mercy in the sight of this man. For I was the king's cupbearer. So he's talking about how he was the king's cupbearer. Let's see if he's still the king's cupbearer by the time we get to Nehemiah chapter 2. What's a cupbearer? He's obviously been reduced to the stature where he's not only a prophet for the Most High, but he gets to hold this heathen, this dirty ass heathen's cup for him while he sits on his throne or wherever he's at until he wants to take a sip. It sounds like a Black, Hispanic, and Native American situation. We still see photographs of things like these today. Our children being used as footstools and things of that nature. And his brother got the privilege of being some heathen's cupbearer, right? Nehemiah chapter 2, verse 1. And it came to pass in the month Nisan, in the 20th year of Artaxerxes, the king, that wine was before him. And I took up the wine and gave it unto the king. Now I had not been before time sad in his presence. Anyway, what we see is that this brother still got to be a cupbearer to a king in Persia. He's not in his land. He's in Persia, in Shushan, the palace. And he is performing the duty of being a cupbearer. So that we're following a linear logic. So now, let's look at the estate of the rest of the Israelites, because maybe Nehemiah is just the only one that didn't get to see this glorious salvation that the Most High promised in Isaiah 14 that us Israelites just don't consider, right? Nehemiah chapter 1, and this time we're going to start at verse 2, and we're going to look at more of the characters that are being talked about in the narrative, right? This is very important. So Nehemiah 1 and 2, that Hanai, one of my brethren, came, and certain men of Judah. Now pay attention. And I asked them concerning the Jews that had escaped, which were left of the captivity concerning Jerusalem. So this is talking about the Jews that returned to Jerusalem. So this glorious salvation that Vocab Malone talked about, everybody else got to experience it, but not Nehemiah. Nehemiah is still under the oppressor, and everybody else, they're ruling over their oppressors in Jerusalem. Right? And mind you, this is only talking about Judah at this point. And maybe a remnant of the northern kingdom that might swoop through. Let's read verse 3. And they said unto me, let's see what they say about this glorious salvation that they received. And they said unto me, the remnant that are left of the captivity there in the province are in great affliction. Who's afflicting them if they're ruling over their oppressors? They're still being oppressed according to this narrative. And reproach. The wall of Jerusalem also is broken down, and the gates thereof that are burned with fire. So it's just crazy, man, because if we learn about the real salvation, what you'll see is that the heathen are going to be building up our walls. So not only are we going to take them and possess them, but we're going to possess them for the purpose of building up our land. Here they are being afflicted by the very same heathen that we are going to put in captivity when Isaiah 14 really comes to pass. All right? So our gates thereof are burned with fire. Let me see. Maybe we should read it. Maybe we should read it in the ESV. No, I ain't gonna do y'all like that. So we see that those that escape from the captivity of Babylon, escaped from Persia, I should say. We see that they're just living it up under affliction to the heathen round about them. So now let's go ahead and just read down. We're going to start up at 5. And I said, I beseech thee, O Lord God of heaven, the great and terrible God that keepeth covenant and mercy for them that love him and observe his commandments. We're going to read all the way through 11. Let thine ear now be attentive, and thine eyes open, that thou mayest hear the prayer of thy servant, which I pray before thee now, night and day, for the children of Israel, thy servants, and confess the sins of the children of Israel, which we have sinned against thee. Both I and my father's house have sinned. We have dealt very corruptly against thee, and I have not kept the commandments, nor the statutes, nor the judgments which thou commandest thy servant Moses. So, here we are in the midst of our great salvation, and one of our greatest prophets are having to pray for salvation for the children of Israel. This is very interesting now. It seems like maybe Vocab alone was cherry picking something that he didn't study, and he created a whole narrative around the word slaves. So let me see. Nor judgments which thou commandest thy servant Moses. Remember, I beseech thee, the word that thou commandest thy servant Moses, saying, if ye transgress, I will scatter you abroad among the nations. But if you return unto me and keep my commandments and do them, though there were of you cast out unto the uttermost part of the heaven, yet will I gather them from thence, and I will bring them into the place that I have chosen to set thy name. So he's asking the Most High to remember this portion of the covenant for a very particular reason. Now, these are thy servants and thy people, whom thou hast redeemed by thy great power and by thy strong hand. O Lord, I beseech thee, let now thine ear be attentive to the prayer of thy servant and to the prayer of thy servants, who desire to fear thy name and prosper. I pray thee, thy servant this day, and grant him mercy in the sight of this man, for I was the king's cupbearer. So that's how it goes. We got a brother, he's hearing stories about Jerusalem, and he's hearing that even though the people supposedly received this great salvation, they're still being afflicted in the land by who knows who, right? And that he himself has to be a cupbearer. That's not a prayer you send out when you're saved from among your enemies and you're put in your own land to rule over your oppressors, right? It says the oppressors. Yet we have oppressors during this time. Something's not adding up. Vocab, no swag. Right, now let's go back to Nehemiah 2. And we're going to go to verse 9. And we're going to hear a little bit more about the affliction that we're seeing. And we're going to do this without the Apocrypha, because these greasy-ass Christians, they like to play games with that. So I'm going to equip you with, to the best of my knowledge, on how to stifle this whack doctrine that they got, this corny, false doctrine they got. So verse 10, when Sanballat the Horonite and Tobiah the servant, the Ammonite, heard of it, it grieved them exceedingly, that there was come a man to seek the welfare of the children of Israel. So this is during the time of them being in the land, and they're looking to rebuild everything. And these heathen that are around them are hating on the children of Israel, something that we all should be very familiar with. Now, let's skip down to verse 19 and just see how far this hatred takes things. Let me see. Now, verse 19, same chapter. But when Sanballat the Horonite and Tobiah the servant, the Ammonite, and Geshem the Arabian heard it, they laughed us to scorn and despised us. And they said, what is this thing that ye do? Will you rebel against the king? Who is there to rebel against if we're the ones doing the ruling and the oppressing? You see? So we're under somebody's dominion, showing that we're not ruling in any capacity. Questions need to be answered. Then answered I them, and said unto them, the God of heaven, he will prosper us. Therefore we his servants will arise and build. But ye have no portion, nor right, no memorial in Jerusalem. And this is another part of his argument, like we're going to be joined hand in hand in the kingdom of heaven somehow as the Christian church, and it's just going to be all good. It doesn't work like that. We don't deal with the heathen. It just is what it is. But they wanna play these stupid games, right? Let's go ahead and skip to. Let's go to chapter 5. Let's go ahead and skip to chapter 5, and we'll start at verse 1. And we're almost done. It's a pretty simple argumentation. You know these key points to go to just to explore the narrative further and just expose the fact that there was no sovereignty restored to us, right? That we weren't ruling over our oppressors. We were still being oppressed. So this is Nehemiah 5:1. And there was a great cry of the people and their wives against their brethren, the Jews. So what's happening among us? What the hell are we up to now? We just got back from this glorious salvation, right? For there were that said, our sons and our daughters are many. Therefore we take up corn for them, that we may eat and live. Some also there were that said, we have mortgaged our lands, vineyards, and houses, that we might buy corn because of the dearth. So there's a drought in the land, right? But this is also having an effect on a whole different aspect of their lifestyles. Let's see what aspect of their lifestyles it is. Verse 4. There were also that said, we have borrowed money for the king's tribute. So it's not an assertion that we're being ruled over and they're just referring to him as the king because he's a king and he's in his own land and, or he's in our land and we're ruling over him. No, we're paying him taxes. Borrow money for the king's tribute. Let's just look into the Hebrew, since Vocab the scholar, he'll dismiss your whole argumentation if you're not scholastic with it and don't go to the Hebrew. So properly extension, that is height or breadth, also a measure, including standard. And standard, right? A standard. Hence a portion as a measure, or a vestment, specifically tribute as measured. Let's look a little further. Let's look at the Browns, Drivers, Briggs. Measure, measurement, stature, size, garment. Measure, act of measurement. Measurement, size, measured, portion, extent, garment, tribute. right? So we had to borrow money for the king's tribute. The tribute was something that was measured out. We was being taxed by this king. We weren't taxing the king, right? We came up out of the land of the Babylonians when we were putting these people in. These people allowed us to go back to the land so that we could rebuild while they continue to oppress us. Very simple. Very simple to break this down. But once you do, you see that mathematically it doesn't add up to what Hocab Malone is saying. This is not salvation where we're ruling over our enemies, where God made things right. Right? We'll revisit Deuteronomy 30 and see what that looks like. The Most High, he's not slack concerning his judgment. Right? He's not slack concerning his judgment. And he's not mocked. He's not mocked. So, those that do what they do, they gotta reap for what they did. So let's see. I'm gonna read down to 5 just to finish it out. Yet now our flesh is as the flesh of our brethren, our children, as their children, and lo, we bring into bondage our sons and our daughters to be servants. And some of our daughters are brought under bondage already. Neither is it in our power to redeem them, for other men have our lands and vineyards. So there's oppression on top of oppression. It's kind of like what you see now. You know what I'm saying? Massa turns on the big dogs turn on the little dogs. And then we act like crabs in a barrel. We lending usury to brothers and sisters in the land. And we trying to pay this tax to this king. It's just not adding up. It's not adding up. And I would love to hear Hocab go into these verses and show me the antithesis. Right? Since I'm the dumb black Hebrew Israelite, right? Let's go to Daniel 9:25. Let's see what Daniel's prophecy said about what these times would look like. Go to Daniel 9. Those of you that aren't familiar with Daniel 9, we're looking at a 490-year prophecy, right? Give or take a year. No, about 490-year prophecy where Daniel describes the timeline between, the leaving the Babylon, the rebuilding the city, and the coming of Yahawashi and then his death. Let's see what he says about these times. We're going to skip down to verse 25. Try to make this thing quick for you. Daniel 9:25. Know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the commandment to restore and rebuild Jerusalem. So the commandment to restore and rebuild Jerusalem would have happened from Persia. This is what we're looking at now. We're looking at them going to restore and rebuild Jerusalem. Unto the Messiah the Prince shall be 7 weeks, and 62 weeks the streets shall be built again, and the wall, even in troublous times. So when we're reading about what's going on with Nehemiah, we haven't even got to where things was rebuilt yet. Right? We read from the testimony of the brothers from the tribe of Judah that were talking to Nehemiah that told him that the streets basically laid in languish, right? And he called these times where we would have to rebuild them in troublous times. Not this salvation that Vocab Malone just falsely prophesied about. Right, so we're gonna wrap it up with that. You know what? No. I'm gonna reiterate Deuteronomy the 30th chapter for those of you that like to ignore how the Most High God does exactly what He says He's gonna do. Deuteronomy the 30th chapter. And Salakia, I'm a little delayed here. I gotta go to bed. So Deuteronomy 30, and this is essentially a part of the covenant that Nehemiah is reflecting on. He's acknowledging the curses, and he's acknowledging the blessings that are in store, and he's trying to, plead for his nation, so that they could get some mercy from the Most High God, because they got things to repent for, so that this can happen. And it shall come to pass when all these things are come upon thee, the blessing and the curse which I have set before thee, thou shalt call them to mind among all the nations, whither the Lord thy God hath driven thee. and shall return unto the Lord thy God, and shall obey his voice according to all that I command thee this day, thou and thy children with all thine heart and with all thy soul, that then Yahweh thy God will turn thy captivity and have compassion upon thee, and will return and gather thee from all of the nations, whither the Lord thy God hath scattered thee. If any of thine be driven out unto the uttermost parts of heaven, from thence will the Lord thy God gather thee, and from thence will he fetch thee. And the Lord thy God will bring thee into the land which thy fathers possessed, and thou shalt possess it. And he will do thee good and multiply thee above thy fathers. And Yahweh thy God will circumcise thine heart and the heart of thy seed to love Yahweh thy God with all thine heart and with all thy soul, that thou mayest live. And Yahweh thy God will put all of these curses upon thine enemies and on them that hate thee, them that are among you. And now I'm paraphrasing from Deuteronomy 28, right? Them that are among you, right? They should get above thee very high. The way they got very high above us, we're going to get back high above them. You shall be the tail, not the head. We're going to be back on top. We're going to be the head again, not the tail. What is this bull that Vocab Malone is talking about? Isaiah 14 is not come to pass. Don't let these heathens try to crush your spirit. You know, it's still Kwam Yasharala. We still got next, and there's nothing that these devils can do about it, right? Until next time, with that, I'm going to say shalom and stay off the Christian crack pipe.